And now to Iran, where the political fate of Ahmadinejad is literally hanging in the balance today. Voters heading to the polls in this presidential election, there's Ahmadinejad casting his vote. They had to extend the voting by 3 different times today because there were so many people turning out. The hardline president faces a stiff challenge from the candidate promising a less contentious relationship in the West, among other things. He also says he's going to get rid of the morality police. Here are the 4 contenders in the race. Many hope a new leader might improve America's relations with Iran. By the thousands, people have been taking to the streets. They've been packing the polling stations in support of their candidate. These rallies reminiscent of the demonstrations that put the Islamic Republic in power in the first place. The current president, he's famous for serving as a former Revolutionary Guardsman, also known for his uncompromising policies and his anti-Israeli rhetoric. Moussavi is the main contender here. His name is Mir Hussein Moussavi. He's a reformist, although there's some question about how much reform he's really interested in. He's a man who served as prime minister already, became very popular with the young people during this election. And then his wife is also in the picture, which is very interesting to watch playing out in Iranian politics. She's fighting hard for women voters and trying to get turnout among them for her husband, who favors more freedom for women. Jim Walsh is an international security expert. Alireza Jafarzadeh is a foreign affairs analyst and the author of The Iran Threat. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have both of you here. Alireza, let me ask you first, is this a genuine democratic outpouring that we're seeing here in the streets of Iran, or is it not what it appears?
Absolutely not. We're not talking about free and fair elections. We're talking about, as you mentioned earlier, 4 candidates, all approved by the Guardian Council, which is controlled by the Supreme Leader, and all of them have very checkered past, tremendous credentials in terms of terrorism and hostage-taking and hijacking, and also domestic suppression. However, what you see, it's a real factional infighting. The 2 sides are lining up against one another. On one side, you have Moussavi, backed by Rafsanjani and Khatami, the 2 former presidents. On the other side, you have Ahmadinejad, backed by the Supreme Leader and also supported by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. So we're not really talking about a genuine election, right. Rather popular factional infighting.
All right. I mean, it's possible that it could be some very small step, I guess, in the right direction. Jim Walsh, Khamenei, the Ayatollah Khamenei, still continues to be very much in charge there from everything that we see. So is this a battle that is he pitting these people against each other for some reason?
No, and I would strongly disagree with Ali. Anyone who has watched the televised debates in Iran between the candidates could not help but notice that these candidates don't like each other and have very different views. Yes, they were approved as establishment candidates, but they represent very different points along the ideological spectrum. Moussavi, the reform principalist, as he's calling himself, attacked Ahmadinejad for his comments on the Holocaust, for his comments on Israel, for his aggressive confrontational policy towards the U.S., and the fact that the Iranian people are turning out in high numbers, they clearly think the election matters, or they wouldn't turn out. In 2005, they didn't turn out because it was Rafsanjani and Ahmadinejad. They didn't see that there was a real choice there, so they stayed home. They are not staying home today. So regardless of what we think, the Iranian people think this does matter, and that's why they're turning out in big numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And, as you point out, there were 6 televised debates, Alireza, which, obviously the government wouldn't allow that to happen if they didn't want it to happen. But talk to me a little bit about the class divide here, because I'm getting the impression that some of the upper classes, some of the more educated in Iran are embarrassed by Ahmadinejad, and that they feel he's, presenting them in a way they don't want to be presented on the world stage.
Well, there's certainly, as I said earlier, factional infighting. There are 2 sides to this whole thing. On one side, you have Ahmadinejad, backed by the Revolutionary Guards, backed by the Supreme Leader, and on the other side, you have Rafsanjani, Khatami, and Moussavi. This is the real lineup of the 2 sides. What happened during the debates, it was really meant to perhaps imitate what was happening in the United States, or perhaps help Ahmadinejad, to boost his standing. But it turned very ugly because the 2 sides were accusing each other of corruption, of getting involved in terrorism, of murder, of running private jails, and so on. Moussavi, Jim Walsh mentioned about his attack on Ahmadinejad. he didn't mention that Ahmadinejad fired back and said that, look, you're accusing me of being anti-Israel. You yourself have called for wiping Israel off the map. You yourself, when you were the prime minister, you were lining up Revolutionary Guards, trying to send them to Lebanon to fight against the Israelis.
Gentlemen,
so we're not really talking about two different credentials. Rather, the two factions who are trying to get to see who gets the power.
It's going to be very interesting who gets the power, and I got to go, but I want to ask you both, that, very quickly, to just say who you think is going to win. Jim Walsh, who wins this?
I'll say Moussavi, and I'll also say everyone who's predicted a winner in the past two elections has been wrong.
Okay,
so I presume I'll be wrong, but I'll say
Alireza?
Moussavi.
Well, who's your bet, Alireza?
Well, based on what Jim Walsh says, well, that means that I shouldn't make a prediction. I think the two sides are actually claiming victory. Both Ahmadinejad's camp and Moussavi's camp are saying they're going to come out as winners. So I think it could go either way, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ahmadinejad eventually turned out as being the winner.
Alireza Jafarzadeh, thank you. Jim Walsh, always good to see you as well. Gentlemen, we'll see you soon.